Hello and welcome back to this episode of the Beth Effect. It's a very special episode because we are actually wrapping up season 1 of the Beth Effect podcast. I'm your host, Beth Clifford. And before I get started, I just also want to thank our sponsors all season, Elevation Health. Thank you for all you've done to kind of keep me balanced and healthy. I am very excited about wrapping up this season and kind of reflecting back on all the changes over the last 6 months since the Beth Effect launched. So the whole reason why I started this podcast was because I wanted to give myself and others the permission and the opportunity to be completely unfiltered. And when I say that, I mean, for me, I had podcasted for 3 years, actually kind of bittersweet because it started in this office. I remember picking out the wallpaper for this room. We moved into this house and I started podcasting a couple months later. And so this office that I'm sat in now has been my podcasting space and I've loved it. Took a 6-month break last year and then relaunched and rebranded the Beth Effect. And the reason why is that I felt like as I was podcasting previously, there were several aspects or parts of my life that I didn't want to talk about. Primarily for me, it was like my career. So like anything work related, I will use the word scared and nervous to talk about. I felt that if I talked too much about my job, it would bother people either at work, like I was nervous for people even at my company to hear that I had a podcast. And then I was even more nervous to talk about anything that was going on with work, anything I learned at work, not even like company secrets, just things. Like it was such a huge part of my life, but I felt too timid to talk about it. So I just kind of stuck with motherhood or like lifestyle. I was also even nervous to touch on beauty, even though that's like the beauty and the wellness space is where I've spent my personal career for the last decade. And so when I took a little break and I really kind of relaunched and came back as the Beth Effect, it was this movement for me internally to allow myself to talk about everything that I wanted to. And a huge part of that was my career, and I wasn't scared to share my takeaways, things I've learned, almost giving myself permission to brag about this achievement that I didn't feel like I could talk about in lots of ways. But it also opened up my eyes to so many things and so many different careers and so many different people. And I slowly got less and less scared. And I remember I did a whole podcast on manifesting, and I had sat down, I'd read several books on manifesting. I've always kind of believed in it. But as I did an exercise at the beginning of the year when the podcast launched, I kept a planner. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm actually just going to grab the planner, so like hold it up here. But like I got a 2025 planner at the beginning of January. And in this planner, it's literally a full page per day. And they're just blank pages. And I would just go in. It has nothing to do with, I have my diary for work and the kids' schedule and Brad's schedule. And that's more of like time commitments. But I wanted to keep a journal specifically for thoughts and feelings or ideas or inspiration, anything that came to me that day. And let me tell you, there's lots of days in here where there's nothing written down. But then I started having days I would take it on trips with me, and I would have an idea of like, oh, I want to talk about this on a podcast, or I want to reach out to this person. I felt inspired to reach out to this person. What were the things that I want to talk to them about? Or I kind of really want to go visit this place or that place. And the more that I started writing down my physical thoughts, the more excited I got, and the more it opened up my mind to like, what things in life have I not considered? But I specifically wrote down at the beginning of the year too, like what I wanted to manifest, to get really clear on it. And I purposely didn't say, here's this thing that I want. I really wanted to explain how I wanted to feel and what kind of qualities was I looking for, like in the places that I wanted to live, in the time that I spent working or basically outside of the home in my career, what did that look like? And I got really clear on what I wanted. And it's interesting because one of the goals of our family has been for my husband to launch his business, which is based in the United States, also in Europe and in the UK. And since I'm a UK citizen and also a US citizen now, we thought it would be really fun at some point to live in the UK for a couple of years while he did that. But it was always like, oh, one day that would be fun, or one day that would be fun. And I've always had this longing to at least give the children that are half of me some kind of life experience that I also had. There's so much of their childhood that I can relate to in parts, and there's so much of Brad's life that I can relate to. And there's a huge chunk of me that feels slightly American now too, if I'm honest, as far as like the convenience and the day-to-day life. Like I've lived here for 2 decades. So there's nothing wrong with it, but there's a huge piece of me that is English still. I mean, I am English. I still feel English. There's just a huge part of who I am and my upbringing that it's really difficult when the people that you love the most can't relate to it. And so if given the choice and given the opportunity, of course, I would love to be able to share some of that upbringing and some of that experience with my husband and kids, not permanently, maybe permanently, but for at least for a couple of years. And so the more that I wanted that, and manifested it and spoke to Brad about it, it's interesting because I'm going to, well, it might not be interesting to you, but I'm just going to share the story anyway. My company, their headquarters for the international market is based in London, in the outskirts of London, actually, in a little village. And initially I was like, oh, well, I just need to connect with them and I can transfer. And it's been something that I have reached out and connected and I know almost all of the people over there now over the last year and a half. And each time I would go over to visit with my sister or go on vacation, I would pop into that office and meet people and chat with them. And it's every time I went into the office in person, I felt this overwhelming feeling when I left, like I didn't belong there and that it wasn't meant for me. But there's such a comfort in that because for a decade of my life, I've worked for this company, and some of my best friends and mentors in life work at this company. So there's this familiarity, and if I'm going to move my family across the world, like at least there could be something familiar. But I keep coming back to like what I manifested or what I wrote down and what I wanted to manifest for myself. And it never had like a corporate job on there. Everything was about building time and freedom and pushing myself and starting my own company and doing all these things that I could only one day have dreamed about. And what's interesting about manifesting is that you put in the belief, you put in the groundwork, and you do all the things. And it got to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to wait for my company to have the perfect job for me, because they had jobs available, but they weren't the ones that I wanted. And so I was like, I'm just going to apply for Brad's visa on my own to the UK, and I'm just going to get the house ready. And I started working on all these different projects that would move us in the right direction. And our company, it was so hard because the thing that I loved the most about my career in corporate America is the people that I worked with, and the relationships and the people that mentor me and I've mentored. And we went through a full restructure at the end of May, and my entire team basically got blown up. I no longer reported into my boss, who was also a very dear friend and mentor of mine. I lost almost all of my team, but one. And experiencing that, it was almost like the universe was really slapping me across the face to be like, it's time. Like, it is time. Take the leap. And we listed our house. I had been speaking to different agents in the UK, leasing agents for homes and whatnot. And there were some homes that I would fall in love with. And then, they wanted us to sign a lease immediately. Well, we're not going to do that. We hadn't sold our house here. We didn't have a moving plan. Everything was a pipe dream. And it's just so funny that when you take the leap and you decide, no, we're doing this, we are actually doing this. Everything happened for us so quickly. It was almost like I had dreamt of this for a year and a half, openly vocalized that I wanted this for a year, was starting to work towards it, doing all the things, and it felt like nothing was happening. And then all at once it happened within 2 weeks. The very last day that I was a leader over my beloved team, which is no secret, I absolutely adored my team, was the day that the family that purchased our house came and looked around it. And then the day that I, let my company know, hey, I'm leaving and I'm going to, we're moving and I'm no longer going to stay in corporate America, was the day that, I was approached with one of my first clients. It was a big contract. And it's just so interesting how life works that way, that you have to take the leap. Manifesting is, I've said this before, but it's self-respect in action. It's a doing word. It's a verb. It's not just a wish. You have to do the work, and then all of a sudden everything falls into place. But it doesn't just happen overnight. You have to start believing that it would happen. And that is why, obviously we're wrapping up season 1 of the Beth Effect right now. And I'm sat here really feeling like so many feelings in this office that I built. This has literally been my dream office. It was like, paid a lot of money for this wallpaper, which I absolutely have loved. Everyone told me I'd get sick of it. I never got sick of it in almost 4 years of being in here. The furniture I've absolutely loved. It's been a source of comfort and inspiration, and this is my last week in it. The family that we sold our house to take ownership of this house at the end of the week. And so, as obviously because of that, season 1's going to wrap, and there'll be a little break before I'm back for season 2. But I feel like I'm also sat here. If I look at who I was 4 years ago to who I am today, I'm very, very different. But if I even look at who I was back in January when I started the Beth Effect in season 1, and who I am today as we wrap up season 1, I'm a very different person too. I've grown. I'm a lot more tired. I'm a lot more stressed, but I'm stressed because I'm inspired, and I feel like the lid of the box has been blown wide open, and the direction of where I want to go. And, it's no secret. I have this tattoo on the side of my ribs that says untamed on it, which I got after my grandma passed away, a year and a half ago. And there's always been a piece of me that has been untamed. And the more that I lean into that, like, I started the Beth Effect wanting listeners to feel free to talk about and to have permission to lean into who they are and not who people want them to be or expect them to be. And whether that means talking about beauty or lifestyle or family or your career, and wanting more or less in any of those areas and being inspired by others, that's what this is about. But it's also this whole process and doing this podcast. If it didn't help anyone out there, it's really helped me. And I'm so grateful for this unfiltered, unscared version of me that is not afraid anymore of what others may say or think or take away from me, by just leaning into being unapologetically me and kind of blowing the roof off the cage, if you will. Life is taking me in a direction that is terrifying because it's all new, but it's also really, really exciting. And I can't wait to be able to share more of that once we get settled and once we're back for season 2. But I just want to say thank you to the listeners that have listened along for season 1. I've absolutely loved it, and I've loved the journey, and I've loved pushing myself, and I will be back. Please be patient as we kind of get through this whirlwind that will be the next couple of months. But I hope, if you have been listening along, or even if this is maybe your first podcast listening to me ever, I just would like to just leave by saying that I am such a firm believer that you really only have one life to live, and the world doesn't need you to be anyone but yourself, and you don't need to edit or filter or be scared of who you are, and you also don't have to be scared of going after the life that you want. And if that means completely changing your home environment, your job, your body, your health, your friendship group, your relationship, if there is a part of your life that you feel is anchoring you down or holding you back or preventing you from living the life you want, give yourself permission to lean in and go get the life you want, because it's scary, but you're not alone, and it's really liberating. And I can't wait to come back and share more of how things are going. So thank you for listening along. If you want to follow behind the scenes throughout the move, you can follow me on Instagram at the Beth Effect, or you can also find me on LinkedIn under Beth Clifford for career updates and new projects I'm taking on. If you're also interested in using me as a consultant, you can also find my website on both of those places. So LinkedIn, Beth Clifford, or Instagram at the Beth Clifford. So thank you for listening and follow along with season 1, and we will be back. We will be back very soon with season 2 of The Beth Effect. Until then, have a good summer.